Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett, the man who plays hockey like he's trying to win a WWE belt at the same time. 2022-2023 playoffs, Bennett gets tangled up with Matthew Knies, and by tangled, we mean he body slammed him straight onto the ice. Knies didn't just lose the puck, he lost the rest of the series too, thanks to a concussion. But Bennett wasn't done. In the same game, he decided Michael Bunting's face looked like it needed a couple of cross-checks, for good measure. The refs gave him a 2-minute timeout, probably to cool off and reflect on his life choices, and the NHL fined him $5,000. Fast forward to Game 1 of this year's playoffs, and guess who's back in the headlines? Bennett again. This time, he's charging the net and accidentally clips goalie Anthony Storals right in the head with his glove. Nothing too serious, unless you count the part where Storals got pulled, threw up on the bench, and had to be taken to the hospital while the third period was still underway. If playoff chaos had a middle name, it would probably be Sam Bennett. The man has a highlight reel, but not the kind that inspires a coach's show. In 2021, Bennett, now wearing Panthers colors, absolutely launched Blake Coleman of the Lightning into the boards from behind. In the third period, the intensity was high, and Coleman met plywood. Bennett got a 2-minute minor for charging, and the NHL later handed him a 1-game suspension for boarding. Matthew Tkachuk, the NHL's ultimate menace with a mouth. This guy's been suspended 4 times between 2016 and 2023, and that's just the appetizer. His real superpower is getting under your skin with a cocktail of trash talk, cheap shots, and just enough skill to keep him on the ice instead of the penalty box. 2023 playoffs, Panthers vs. Bruins, Game 4. Tkachuk lands a little cross-check to Garnett Hathaway's ribs after the whistle. Classy, right? But wait, it gets better. Later that same game, there's a full-on group of reporters around the Bruins' net. Emotions boiling, chaos swirling, and who's in the middle of it? Tkachuk. He annoys Bruins goalie Linus Ullmark so much that the poor guy actually tries to drop the gloves and go full goalie gladiator mode. Officials had to intervene before it escalated into World War III. Matt Cooke. Now, if we're talking all-time NHL villains, you have to mention the name Matt Cooke. During his time with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Cooke developed a reputation for hits that weren't just questionable, they were career-altering. In 2010, he delivered a brutal headshot that effectively ended Marc Savard's career. And just a year later, he elbowed Ryan McDonagh square in the jaw, earning himself a lengthy suspension and the unofficial crown of the league's most wanted. The thing is, Cooke didn't always break the rules, but when he did, it was spectacular. He was the kind of player who knew how to dance right up to the line, then stomp all over it when no one was looking. But his final act came in 2014 with the Minnesota Wild. First round playoff series, Avalanche vs. Wild. Cooke decides to go full demolition mode and delivers a nasty knee-on-knee hit to Colorado's Tyson Barrie. The result is a 7-game suspension and yet another angry fanbase ready to print voodoo dolls. To be fair, Cooke already had beef with Colorado dating back to his Vancouver days, but this was the final straw. After that hit, the clock ran out on his NHL career. One more injury-riddled season, then Minnesota bought out his contract, and just like that, Cooke disappeared from the league. Raffi Torres. In 2011, with Vancouver, Torres clocked Brent Seabrook during their clash with the Blackhawks right in the middle of Chicago's dynasty years. That hit may not have resulted in a suspension for him, but it certainly helped the Canucks, and it set the tone for what was to come. 2012, Coyotes vs. Blackhawks, Round 1. Marian Hossa takes a brutal headshot from Torres. Hossa was stretchered off. Torres got 25 games for that one, eventually reduced to 21, and 13 of those games came during the playoffs. That's not a suspension, that's a playoff exile. You think he would learn? In 2013, he was on the San Jose team. Game 1 against the Kings. Torres delivers another headshot, this time to Jarrett Stoll. He got suspended for the rest of the series and the Kings went on to win it. The grand finale came in the 2014 preseason. He drills Jacob Silfverberg of the Ducks with yet another hit to the head. The NHL had seen enough. Torres got 41 games. That's not a slap on the wrist, it's half the season. And that was the last we saw of him in the league. Torres didn't just cross the line, he bulldozed it, then turned around and tried to cross-check it in the face. And with that, his NHL career ended not with a bang, but with a ban. Ty Domi. Notorious for his aggressive style of play, Domi wasn't just a fighter, he was a warrior. But even for a guy whose fists basically had their own stat line, one hit stood out for all the wrong reasons. Game 4, Leafs vs. Devils. Series tied 2-2. Toronto's closing out a win. The clock's ticking down. Everyone's winding down except Domi. Out of nowhere, he skates past Devils defenseman Scott Niedermayer and delivers a flying elbow to the head. Niedermayer drops like a stone. The building goes silent. He has to be stretchered off the ice. It was ugly. it was unnecessary, and it was peak villainy. The NHL acted fast, and Domi was suspended for the rest of the playoffs. But joke's on Toronto, because that suspension only lasted 3 games. The hit so fired up the Devils that they came back, won the series in 7 games, and went on a tear all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Tom Wilson. With impressive notoriety and a resume built on habitual line stepping, Tom Wilson doesn't just flirt with controversy, he takes it to dinner and proposes. The guy plays with a physical edge so sharp it might as well have come with a warning label. Whether he gets suspended or not almost feels like an afterthought. Every time Wilson levels someone, it sets off the same predictable reaction. His fans defend him like he's a national treasure. Everyone else gets their keyboards on fire and screams until someone in a suit hands down a suspension or doesn't, in which case the volume just doubles. Wilson doesn't just bring fire to a game, he's the guy who throws gasoline on it, lights a match, and skates away while the scorer's table is still checking the replay. In the opening round against Montreal, he made the whole city see red, and not in the team colors kind of way. But this isn't a one-time act. He's been turning playoff matchups into grudge matches for years. Just ask the Rangers, Maple Leafs, or Penguins. They all know what happens when Tom Wilson comes to town. Somebody's getting hit, somebody's getting mad, and somebody's enforcer is getting called up from the AHL. When teams start dressing guys like Ryan Reeves or calling up Matt Rempe just to keep things Wilson-proof, that's not an accident. Aaron Rome. Aaron Rome wasn't exactly a household name. A solid depth defenseman, but not someone you would expect to headline a Stanley Cup final. That is, until Game 3 of 2011. Rome delivered a late, high, and brutal headshot to Boston's Nathan Horton. Horton was knocked out cold and would be out for the rest of the series. Rome got suspended for 4 games, which turned out to be the rest of the finals. And that right there was the moment the Canucks' Cup dreams started to unravel. Vancouver had already poked the bear with Maxime Lapierre's sounds and Alex Burrow's bitey behavior, but Rome's hit didn't just poke the bear, it woke it up. Boston erupted. They crushed Vancouver in all 3 games at home and then marched into Rogers Arena for Game 7 and snatched the Stanley Cup in front of a stunned, silent crowd. Brad Marchand. When it comes to driving opposing fans completely insane, Brad Marchand is in a league of his own. Throughout his career with the Bruins, he's been less of a player and more of a rat king on skates, wreaking havoc with a smile and surprisingly deadly scoring touch. He didn't just study the rulebook when it comes to dirty tricks, he highlighted the loopholes, exploited them, and wrote a few new chapters while he was at it. From low hits in open ice to elite level taunting and getting warned by the NHL for licking other players like a confused golden retriever. And yet, through all the chaos, Marchand still manages to rack up points and stay in the opponent's heads rent-free. His reputation walks into the building before he does, and the wild part is that you can never quite prepare for him because the moment you think you've figured out what he's going to do, he does something no one's expecting. Marchand doesn't just bend the rules, he changes the entire mental game around him. Nazem Kadri. For Nazem Kadri, that edge hasn't always worked in his team's favor, especially in the playoffs, where he has turned high-stakes hockey into a personal crash course in what not to do. Kadri has been suspended 3 separate times in the postseason. That's not a stat you want on your hockey card. In 2018, during Game 1 against Boston, Kadri boarded Tommy Wengels like he was trying to send him into the 12th row. It ended in a 3-game suspension. The very next year, the same opponent, the same energy, but a bigger punishment. This time he cross-checks Jake DeBrusk right in the grill during Game 2. The NHL says that's enough and suspends him for the rest of the series. The Leafs never made it out of round 1. By this point, Kadri had his PhD in bad timing, and then came 2021, now with the Colorado Avalanche. Kadri lays a nasty headshot on Blues defenseman Justin Falk in Game 2, an 8-game suspension. But the Avs sweep the Blues and fall to Vegas in 6. So Kadri's punishment literally outlasts his team's playoff run. But here's where it gets good. Kadri finally figures it out. In 2022, he kept his head on straight and helped the Avalanche win the Stanley Cup. Along the way, he got Blues goalie Jordan Binnington so worked up that the man nearly threw a Gatorade bottle at him from across the arena. PK Subban. PK Subban didn't just play hockey, he performed it, and his favorite stage was the enemy's territory. With swagger straight out of a pirate movie, Subban mastered the art of getting under people's skin, and not just fans, but refs too. His flair for the dramatic came with a price tag, a $2,000 fine here, $3,000 there, and by 2017 he had practically earned a frequent diver's discount. But the drama didn't stop at the dives. Subban had a sly habit, some might say a signature move of slew-footing opponents. The first big one was a not-so-friendly trip on Chris Kunitz back in 2012. Then came the $5,000 swipe at Milan Lucic's legs in 2021, and just 8 days later, another $15,000 fine for taking out Trevor Zegras. and here's where it gets juicy. There were a few ninja moments when Subban slipped through the cracks, like the mysterious skate clip on Sammy Blais in November 2021, or that not-so-subtle slew foot on Nikolai Ehlers a month later. No penalties, no suspensions, just a flood of angry tweets and armchair referees going wild. Jordan Binnington. Jordan Binnington, proof that even goalies can go full villain mode. At 30, the St. Louis Blues netminder has built a reputation less on glove saves and more on glove swings. When the game's not going his way, let's just say neither is anyone else's. The chaos really kicked off on February 28, 2021. Binnington got kicked out mid-game against the Sharks, and instead of heading to the bench quietly like a good boy, he went mad. He shoved Radim Simek, poked Erik Karlsson with his stick like he was checking for a pulse, and almost threw hands with Devin Dubnyk. Yes, the other goalie. But here's where it gets more interesting. Flash forward to the 2022 playoffs. Avs center Nazem Kadri is mid-interview, talking about shots and puck possession, when a water bottle comes flying in like it's auditioning for a Mission Impossible stunt, courtesy of Jordan Binnington. And in December, Penguins winger Jason Zucker made the unforgivable mistake of skating near Binnington's crease. The punishment was a glove to the face. However, the most interesting performance took place on March 16, 2023. After taking a cheap shot at wild forward Ryan Hartman, Binnington managed to enrage Marc-Andre Fleury. Yes, the nicest man in hockey. Fleury was so furious, he sprinted furiously across the ice, ready to throw down. Refs had to physically hold him back from causing more damage, a goalie fight we were this close to witnessing. For that one, Binnington finally earned a 2-game timeout. Jacob Trouba. He got a $5,000 slap on the wrist in January 2020 for slashing Vince Dunn, then another in November 2023 for high-sticking the Bruins' Trent Frederick. Apparently, his stick gets spicy when emotions run high. However, it's with his borderline hits that things get messy, and by borderline, we mean hits that have fans screaming suspension and coaches reaching for stress balls. The most infamous is Trouba's collision with Sidney Crosby in the 2022 playoffs, Game 5. One hit, and Crosby's out for Game 6, and the Rangers flip the script on the series. Penguins fans would rather not talk about it. After the Frederick incident, social media erupted with people either calling for his head or advocating for a statue in his honor. And speaking of statues, New York Post's Larry Brooks basically handed him a chisel and a pedestal, calling Trouba the villain the Rangers have longed for. Ryan Reaves. At 36, Reaves has brought in a 3-year deal to bring swagger and a little chaos to the Leafs lineup. So far, let's just say the impact has been more vocal than physical, but rewind the tape a decade and you'd see a totally different beast. Back in his St. Louis Blues days, Reaves was the ultimate fourth-line wrecking ball. He hit like a truck, fought like it was personal, and made sure no one even looked at his teammates sideways. Fans in St. Louis adored him. Reaves couldn't care less about those who disliked him. For him, it meant mission accomplished. His brand of chaos made him a hot commodity. Since 2017, he bounced around the league like a well-known body check. Penguins, Golden Knights, Rangers, Wild, and now Leafs. But being the villain comes at a cost. In 2016, he got 3 games for blindsiding Matt Tennyson. Then came the 2020 playoffs, a 1-game ban for ringing Tyler Mott's bell, and in 2021, 2 games for roughing up Ryan Graves, and apparently, his manners, unsportsmanlike conduct included. He's thrown shade at Brad Marchand, traded jabs with Corey Perry. He's literally running a roast tour across the NHL. It's hilarious, it's loud, it's peak Reaves. But here's the thing, while he's racking up sound bites, the Leafs are still not exactly terrifying anyone on the ice. Corey Perry. Corey Perry, the NHL's original agent of chaos, known across the league as the Worm, and no, that's not a compliment. Perry built a reputation as hockey's ultimate pest. Trash talking was his wheelhouse. If you weren't mad at Corey Perry, were you even playing against him? Loved by teammates, hated by almost everyone else, Perry didn't just skate the line between legal and dirty, he power slid over it with a smile. Take September 2009 for example. Perry lands a 4-game vacation for an illegal headshot on Claude Giroux. Not to be outdone, he earns another 4 in 2013 for a blindside hit on Jason Zucker. But the worst was the 2020 Winter Classic. A vast national stage, millions watching. Perry lasted all of 3 minutes before throwing an elbow at Ryan Ellis and getting booted. That 5-game suspension made him the only player ever tossed from a Winter Classic. That's one way to make history. That's just normal Corey, sneaking stick jabs when the refs aren't looking, elbows that accidentally meet faces. He didn't care if fans booed him in every building. In fact, he probably liked it. And that's why he's here, a Hall of Fame level instigator with the receipts to prove it. Chris Pronger. Chris Pronger wasn't just a defenseman, he was a full-contact press conference. Reporters hated interviewing him, which is why they loved interviewing him. Ask a question, and he would give you a riddle. He would ask a follow-up, and he would respond with a question of his own. It was like trying to play chess with a guy holding a flamethrower. But here's where it gets crazier. Pronger knew exactly what he was doing. Whether he was skating for the Flyers or roasting a reporter, he had a gift for pulling the spotlight onto himself and keeping it there. Fans couldn't stand him, which is why they couldn't stop watching him. And on the ice, he was even worse. Pronger didn't just bend the rules, he snapped them over his knee. Throughout his career, he accumulated 8 suspensions and missed a total of 22 games. Just your standard light stuff: cross-checking, slashing, throat sticks, headshots, bench-clearing brawls, and once casually using his skate as a weapon. No big deal. He was the NHL's answer to a Bond villain, only bigger, meaner, and with a better slapshot. His career came to a hard stop in November 2011 after he was diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome. But even off the ice, the legend of Chris Pronger lives on in fines, fear, and frustrated journalists everywhere. Sean Avery. Avery fought a lot, but his true villainy came from above the shoulders, mainly in the form of mind games, taunts, and antics that were so annoying the NHL had to write a rule just to stop him. Then came the Avery Rule, an actual regulation banning players from waving their sticks in a goalie's face like they were trying to swat a fly off a windshield. Yes, that really happened, and it's named after him. Avery didn't just irritate opponents, he somehow managed to annoy people in his own locker room. His time with the New York Rangers was a drama series disguised as a hockey career, and nobody clashed harder with him than head coach John Tortorella. The two had a relationship best described as flammable, and when Torts got fired in 2013, a year after Avery retired, Sean didn't hold back. He went online and announced he had the biggest smile on his face when he heard the news. No filter, no chill, no regrets. Love him or absolutely loathe him, Avery left his mark on the game. Todd Bertuzzi. He wasn't always hockey's ultimate villain until 2004 happened. That's when Todd Bertuzzi decided to display some super moves. Vancouver Canucks were fuming because Colorado's Steve Moore had injured their golden boy, Captain Marcus Naslund. Naturally, revenge was on the menu. Moore tried to settle it early, dropped the gloves, and scrapped with Matt Cook just 6 minutes into the game. That should have been it. Score settled, blood spilled, we move on. But Vancouver was losing 8-2 and Bertuzzi was still hungry. He stalked Moore across the ice like a lion with a grudge, pestering, taunting, poking the bear. Then, out of nowhere, a sucker punch straight to the jaw. Moore went down, very hard. His head slammed the ice like a dropped bowling ball. The result was 3 fractured vertebrae, a concussion, career over. Bertuzzi got suspended, Moore got a hospital bed, and hockey got one of its darkest chapters. Claude Lemieux. Claude Lemieux, the man, the menace, the walking hockey grudge match. Claude never pretended to be a saint. He didn't just lean into the villain role, he practically body-checked his way into it, wearing a black cape. Fans booed him, opponents hated him, and Claude thrived on it. But if there was ever a moment that sealed his status as hockey's ultimate heel, it was that hit that sent Chris Draper face first into the boards. Broken nose, shattered cheekbone, wired jaw. Claude didn't just hurt Draper, he lit the fuse for one of hockey's bloodiest rivalries. The Avalanche still knocked out the Red Wings that night, but wait, it gets nastier. Lemieux returned to Detroit on March 26, 1997. That game turned into a full-blown brawl fest, 39 penalties, even the goalies were throwing hands. And then came the main event. Darren McCarty, Draper's best bud, came flying in, sucker punched Lemieux, and turned him into a human punching bag. But Claude wasn't done writing his villain origin story just yet. November 11th, 1997, Lemieux skates up to McCarty and says, "Let's go." Opening face-off, 3 seconds in, gloves off, fists flying. This wasn't just a fight, it was a sequel. Lemieux has secretly been taking boxing lessons, and this time he held his own. Tuomo Ruutu. Most NHL teams would kill to have a guy like Tuomo. He's got the hands, the hustle, and just enough chaos in his DNA to keep things interesting. Tuomo plays with an edge, and by edge we mean elbows, spears, slashes, and anything else short of a folding chair to fight. He's not out there to make friends, he's out there to mess with your head and maybe rearrange a few ribs while he's at it. And don't blink when he lines someone up at center ice. Tuomo's open ice hits are the kind that make highlight reels in disciplinary meetings. But here's the kicker, Tuomo's not even the most chaotic Ruutu. Jarkko Ruutu. Jarkko Ruutu's reputation is league-wide. He's an agitator, a trash talker, and a walking penalty box. Call him what you want, but just don't expect him to care. Jarkko didn't just bend the rules, he chewed on them. Literally, during a scuffle, he bit the gloved hand of Buffalo's Andrew Peters, and when asked about it, he put his thumb in my mouth. This is a guy who used his elbows like extra limbs, racked up suspensions like trading cards, and even leveled Jaromir Jagr during the Olympics. Maxime Lapierre, not your typical NHL bad boy. He's not out here throwing haymakers or racking up 200 PIMs a season. Lapierre specializes in something much more infuriating, being unbelievably annoying. Hits from behind, flopping like a fish when barely touched, and harmless. Steve Ott, the NHL's equivalent of a bar fight that never ends. This guy was a full-blown chaos agent, and if you were a Boston Bruin, you would probably still flinch every time you hear his name. Ott made enemies the old-fashioned way, with headshots, low bridges, hits from behind, and eye gouging. He tried to turn Travis Moan into Mr. Potato Head. While some players chirped, Ott swung. While others were irritated, he instigated. He was the kind of guy who would fight you, then smile while the trainer stitched you up. Now, to his credit, he did fight. Gloves off, fists flying. He wasn't hiding behind the ref like some others. But here's the scary part. Steve Ott wasn't just brawling for the fun of it. Sometimes it felt like he genuinely didn't care who got hurt or how badly. And while Ott might not be a saint, at least he stood in the fire, which brings us to the next player. Sidney Crosby, NHL legend, generational talent, face of the league, and to some, biggest crybaby on ice. Look, nobody's denying Sid's skills. The guy's got hands like silk, vision like a hawk, and a trophy case that's basically a small museum. But outside of Pittsburgh, he's less hockey god and more hockey villain in disguise. We're talking dives that would make Olympic swimmers blush, complaints to refs that sound like someone didn't get their juice box, and let's not forget the fighting. He starts them and then disappears faster than the Penguins in a bad playoff run. Exhibit A, 2008, Crosby jumps into a fight, takes on an Atlanta defenseman in the back of your helmet and maybe a lawyer on speed dial. In his junior days, Downey knocked out a teammate's teeth during practice. Not a fight, not a game, practice. Allen Iverson would be horrified, and it only got worse from there. In the AHL, he earned himself a 20-game suspension for slashing a linesman. No, not Ken Linesman, a literal official. That's a whole new level of I don't care about authority. But his most significant what the hell moment was the 2007 preseason when he absolutely destroyed Dean McAmmond with a blindside headshot. Downey's not the type to play mind games or run his mouth, he just tries to end you. Okay, so let's rewind for a second. Bennett is sending a goalie to the hospital with his glove. Tkachuk's trash talks, a brutal headshot that ends another man's career, and a goalie who's ready to destroy anyone who seems to be on his team's path. Out of all these stories, which one shocked you the most? And if you thought being tagged as a villain was bad, wait till you see what some players did in this next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it.